Next up, we have how athletes can utilize NFTs to build community. Naomi, Niraj, Ryan, and Dr. Lingling, please welcome to the stage. A round of applause for them, please.
Thanks everyone for coming. My name is Niraj, and I'm going to moderate the panel with these three wonderful people, and we're going to dive into a lot of this stuff and hopefully give you a lot of value. So we'll just start with some very quick introductions. I'm the co-founder of a sports tech business where we're working with professional sports clubs on the future of their digital seats. And as part of that, we touch NFTs, we touch blockchain. On the club side, we're helping them to raise new revenue, create new fans. On the fan side, we're experimenting with new models for ownership, participation, all the things that Web3 promises. That's me, Naomi.
My name is Naomi Metzger. I am the 10 times British triple jump champion and Commonwealth bronze medalist from Manchester. Thank you. Thank you. And I created an NFT project after losing my sponsor as an athlete. So I used NFTs to build community and basically self-fund all 3 major championships, which I did last year. And I thank Web3 because I was able to win a medal, as I've said. And yeah, I've definitely used Web3 a lot in my own journey as an athlete.
Thank you, Naomi. My name is Lingling. I came from communication and sports background, and I create my consultancy company called Sports DAO because I believe the philosophy of DAO, and we would like to help sports projects, sports personalities embrace blockchain strategy and also help crypto-related businesses to embrace sports as a strategy. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ryan Badu. I'm head of sports partnerships for Soga World. We're a Web3 agency. I'm a sports agent by trade, so I've been a football agent for about 15 years. And I've now transitioned to actually helping a lot of my athletes go into Web3. We also worked with the first DAO, which we actually bought into a football club in May. And what we're seeing is that a lot of the clubs and athletes are now looking towards hand-holding and ideation as they take those first tentative steps towards Web3.
Thank you very much, guys. So I want to cut straight to the meat of this and really get into what we're seeing already about athletes utilizing NFTs to build community. And we're super privileged because we've got someone here who's already done something like that. So Naomi, I'd love to start with you and just talk us through what you did and what you learned through that.
Yes, so I studied graphic design when I was in school, so I've always been into art and creating. And as an athlete, we often get put into a box. So it's kind of you focus on your athletics or you focus on your sport, you win medals, and you be very good in front of a camera after the game, and that's kind of it. So I really wanted to show my personality in a different way. So I did some drawings. I created a collection called Afro Chicks, which is celebrating Afro hair. And I just did them one by one. I've done about 200 of them now. And on Twitter, I didn't really reveal for the first sort of 2-3 months that I was an athlete. But as the competitions were coming up, I was like, okay, guys, I've got a British Championships. And they were like, wait, what? So I actually built the community before revealing that I was an athlete. And I think that was really interesting because it really allowed people to see who an athlete is behind the scenes, to see us away from just our achievements, but see us as humans. And I think that's where people really connected. So as it continued, I sold out my collection. And one amazing thing that happened is as I was going to my competitions, people, even if I was in Oregon, Birmingham, people would be shouting me in the crowd, and it would be people from my community who have actually traveled to watch my competitions. So they never knew anything about triple jump. They probably wouldn't have seen me on BBC because it's not the most popular of events. But through my community, they were able to have an interest in me and my event as well.
It's amazing. It also touches on something I want to definitely come back to, which is the way that technology in general, but NFTs in particular, are starting to enable that direct connection between athletes and fans. Before we go into that, I wanted to ask the rest of the panel what you're currently seeing about athletes using NFTs, or what they're even thinking about to build that community. Ryan, should we go with you?
Yeah, well, currently, so for instance, we were speaking to a really up-and-coming Brazilian player, and we're speaking with his team, with his agents, and they're thinking about NFTs, they're thinking about Web3. They know they need to be in the space, but they don't know how to do it. So that's what I'm seeing a lot of as well. But what we do as agents is we're always building up the athlete, whether it's their social media, physically, and it's so hard to be a footballer. So you need a team around you to not only build you up, but to prepare for success. So what we're trying to do with a lot of these athletes is for them to get in there early. And if you think about it, if you think about what would you pay now for Cristiano Ronaldo's video footage of him training at Sporting Lisbon, or for Beckham when he scored from the halfway line? So if we can start getting the guys into Web3 early, once they're bigger and more successful, that early footage, those early NFTs are going to be worth so much more as well. So, you know, in general, what I'm seeing is that there's a lot of interest, especially from the agents, because they hear that people have done big drops and made big money. But the good agents are trying to make those first steps. So we had another conversation with a young England and Arsenal international, and his agent had actually constructed his deal so that commercially he could appear with his boots, and he can really maximize upon that as well. So the good agents are now, and the good agencies are now really, really looking at adopting Web3 into the actual initial contract with the players.
Great, and that touches on something else I want to come back to, which is the ownership of those actual assets. Does it sit with the athlete? Does it sit with the club? Does it sit with the sponsor? We'll definitely come back to that. Lingling.
Thank you. Early last year, I was actually helping one of the biggest cryptocurrency exchange platform for its sponsorship strategy and negotiations. So during which I find out actually for crypto world, they know very little about sports. While in the sports world, it's the same situation. So that's how I see our role, that actually communication and education is so important, because if they are not connected, actually it will be very difficult to bring them together as a community. So I think what Naomi talked about earlier is a very good example that actually NFT, or by introducing blockchain strategy as a way of fundraising for individual athletes like Naomi. And but I think actually blockchain technology or strategy can do more things. And of course that needs to be explored by all the people here.
I'll make another point on something that I've actually seen as well. So, I mean, you made some fantastic points there. But on the negative side, there's been a lot of abrasion and a lot of fans thinking, why are you making this JPEG and you make enough money already? And that's because the word NFT has been very, very divisive. So people that don't know anything about crypto just think that people are trying to, make more money from their fans. So what we're now talking about is digital collectibles, and we're trying to make it more palatable for the everyday fan to actually come closer to the athlete, because ultimately that's what they want to do.
Yeah, it's such a good point, because I think the average sports fan is deeply skeptical about NFTs, especially because you look at a platform like Socios. What they've done is amazing. What the amount of clubs they've signed up, what they do is genuinely valuable. But their early proposition was, hey, this is a token that can go up in value as it gets more popular. And then a lot of fans lost money on that, and there's been a big backlash, not just because of them, but in regular fan bases. But the point you just made there, if you look at the community on Reddit, which are very skeptical, very anti-NFT, with good reason as well, because there has been a lot of money grabs in the space and rug pulls and just like very things that don't have depth. But Reddit has had a really successful time on Polygon recently. You may or may not be aware of this. They've sold more than 3 million NFTs. And the way they've done it is because they stopped talking about NFT. Well, I mean, Reddit itself never talked about NFTs, but they basically said, hey, do you want to buy these digital collectibles? This is your avatar. And in the background is an NFT. And to me, that's one of the things that we'll know this technology's been really successful when we stop talking about the actual technology itself, and it just becomes second nature. The same way we don't talk about HTTP and we don't talk about TCP/IP and all of that kind of stuff, even though those are the bits of plumbing that empower the internet, and that's the way I see this stuff as well. Cool. I want to come back to you, Naomi. What barriers did you face when you were putting this all together, and what surprised you about it?
I think my main barrier is when I came into the space, I knew literally nothing about it. I think I came across NFTs because I was on TikTok and saw Gary Vee pop up. And I was like, oh, this looks really interesting. And when I came in and saw all these words like blockchain and even the funny phrases like wag me, I was like, I feel like I'm in a different world. So it was a lot of learning, but I felt like I could always reach out to people and ask for help, and definitely had to research a lot to avoid scams. And that was a lot of the negatives that I found in the space. So yeah, that was my experience.
And just opening that question up, what barriers are you seeing when it comes to athletes utilizing NFTs?
A recent project that we work on was with the African Football Business Summit, which we helped them create NFT Summit Pass. But the challenge is, because most of the delegates, even it's an air job, most of the delegates, they don't know how to download the wallet, and they don't know how to, basically, it's quite skeptical because they have many thoughts and maybe read a lot of negative reports, and like Ryan mentioned earlier. So I think that's the biggest obstacles, because it really needs a lot of education and communication in order to lower the barriers.
You know, I want to pivot slightly on your question, actually, because it's something I do want to share with you guys, actually. There's a little bit of resistance because there's some areas in which people don't want transparency. So we were speaking to the Indonesian club, Persebaya. They have 2 million followers on Instagram. They get 70,000 people for most of the games. I actually transferred a player there last season, and he had a fantastic experience. So, you know, they have 2 million fans. It's a fantastic way for you to actually create more revenue. So we were speaking to them about NFT ticketing. And the reason that they didn't move forward is because that little black economy, the ultra fans who sell their own tickets, they didn't want to disturb them. Now, they actually had the biggest football disaster, I think about 6 weeks, 2 months ago, where 187 people lost their lives due to overcrowding. And when we've been on a Zoom call with them and we've been speaking and going back and forth about them actually, you know, taking forward our proposition would have saved lives as well. So that there's an element where people don't want transparency, and also from the athlete side as well, people do want a lot of advance payments because they don't understand the actual value as well. So those are the two areas I think that need to be worked on.
Yeah, that's something we've come across on the club side as well. Like, they have seen crypto in general and NFTs in particular as a bit of a land grab, a bit of a cash grab rather. So it's starting to cool now that we've been in the crypto winter for a few months. But the attitude from a lot of clubs was, we don't really understand this, but how much are you going to pay us to do something? And I think that just fundamentally misunderstands what the technology is capable of, or what it will be capable of. Moving on to something a little bit lighter, what are the most interesting use cases that you've seen in this sphere with athletes using this kind of stuff? I've got one which I mentioned to you guys before, but I'd love to hear if you've got anything from your side.
So personally, I just want to talk about myself, if that's okay again.
Completely fine.
But one thing that I did was that when I was doing competitions, in athletics we have Diamond League, so you don't have to wear the Great Britain or England kit. I just wore a plain kit and then put an NFT owned by a member of my community. So after I did a jump, and I was jumping pretty well this season, so some of it got some footage, so I was able to share that footage on my Instagram and Twitter, and then give a thanks and a shout out to the person who owned the NFT, and then they felt super connected and felt like they had not only helped me to get to that competition, but also saw their NFT that they own on my kit. So I thought that was a pretty cool use case.
Yeah, that's fun. I think that's a really good example of something that might seem quite trivial to someone who doesn't get it, but it just shows a kind of direct connection that an athlete can have with their fans, which just wasn't possible until now. Anything from you guys?
Do you know what? I haven't seen too many. I've seen a lot of the same utilities, actually, and it's something that we've spoken a lot about as well. So because a lot of these campaigns aren't utility driven, that's the reason that we've had, and I could say probably John Terry, Andy Robinson, Liverpool, fantastic big athletes who haven't actually been able to succeed, because a lot of the time they're selling their NFTs rather than we've had success outside of football selling the utility and what the actual fan is going to get and how close they're going to get to the athlete as well. So I think something weird, wonderful and creative is probably going to be a lot better than what's happening at the moment.
If you look at all the NFT projects, doesn't matter which blockchain it is from, I think most of them are lack of real-world adoptions, and so without any real-world utilities. I think sports actually will be the perfect platform to bring the real-world adoption to the NFT world, and that's how I see it, and I also feel very bullish for sports enter into metaverse, and also I think actually blockchain in the long term will change sports eventually. That's how I see it.
Great, thank you. I've got a couple of. I've got one that's really out there, and I've got one that that is going to open up a different discussion for us. So the one that's really out there first. Sorry, actually, I'll mention the other one first. So the one that I think is really cool is there's been a couple of big NFL athletes, Patrick Mahomes and the Peyton and Eli Manning, they're all superstar quarterbacks. They've done various NFT drops, but they've given a portion of the proceeds to good causes. So that's something that can be done. What I don't know if they did, but what would be super interesting is if those donations were done on chain, because I think the difference now is if it's done on chain, and that may or may not be possible, depends on whether these good causes and charities can even take it that way, but both in terms of regulation and in terms of their ability to. But what makes it really interesting is that now we can see transparently where this money's going. Is it actually going? That's super interesting, and I think there's been some non-sports related charity stuff that's worked really well. So that I think is super cool. I think I read somewhere that you've given a portion to unfunded athletes as well, right?
Yeah, so I donated a portion of my sales to two charities. One's called the Ron Pickering Foundation, which helps just underprivileged athletes, and the other one is the Lloyd Cohen bursary. Lloyd was a coach who passed away of COVID, and his legacy really is just helping young athletes and coaches who need that funding. But as you said, I wish it could have been on the blockchain. I had to make it into fiat and then sort of do it and screenshot it to prove it. And I think if it was all on blockchain, it would have shown that level of transparency.
Yeah, and I think that's super important in the world we live in now, where trust in anything is at an all-time low, and this is a way for an athlete or any entity to demonstrate, no, I actually did do this. And then the second one, which is a little bit out there, and it's going to be so interesting to see how this type of thing plays out. So when I was researching for this panel, I came across a young Croatian pro tennis player. She's 20 years old, ranked in the 600s, but good enough to sort of enter the qualifiers for Grand Slams. She'd actually sold off an NFT that gives the rights to her right arm, which is the one that she serves with, from the elbow to the shoulder, and she sold it for 3 ETH, and it hasn't been sold yet, it hasn't been used yet, but the holder of that NFT can do anything with that arm in terms of like putting a tattoo on it or something like that, which would then get a lot of coverage if she's a young player, got a long career ahead of her, or all of the rest of it. Now that opens up 2 cans of worms. What if I don't know the terms of the deal, but what if she just changes her mind? So number one, that. Number 2, what if the owner of that NFT wants to do something unethical or unpalatable with that piece of real estate now? And then the third thing, and this is what I want to go into with you guys, is, well, in that case, it's a little bit more clearer with that kind of individual athlete, like who owns that real estate. But what this whole world is starting to open up is what's known as name, image, and likeness, and players and athletes are starting to realize that their own image, likeness, and name has a lot of value, both during their playing career and after. So who really has the right to all of that, and in what context? Like if the club sponsor is Nike, can that that player then do a load of stuff with a rival? I mean, of course they can, but in what context? What? I think that line is not super clear, but I've got a feeling that as an athlete, an agent, and as somebody involved on both sides of that, you guys would have a lot more clarity on that.
What I found with that is, like I said, the example beforehand is where you have good agents, they've actually been able to anticipate, and which is pretty difficult, where the actual the commercial rights are going, and include that in the athletes' contracts from early on as well. So it's a big grey area, but it's something where a lot of the bigger agents and the guys that do have the sports lawyers are actually aware of, and they're working on it already as well. And I was quite pleasantly surprised with where some of the guys are at the moment, as well. But again, I think it's a very, very good point, because a player who wears Nike already, that's who actually, how much should they get remunerated if that's not clear in the contract. And I think, going to your point as well, I think with any sort of utility that we're giving, we have to be crystal clear with it, timed and dated, because once it's open in that area, that grey area, if the artist or the athlete doesn't give that utility, ultimately it just burns their credibility for future projects. And those sort of rug ball projects have, burnt the credibility of the people that have been involved with them as well.
Yeah, it's a whole different. Well, it's not different, but it's a whole other discussion. The whole legality of it. So all of these things at some level need to be backed up with physical contracts. But then where are they enforceable? You've got the old issue with, well, it's enforceable in this country, but is it enforceable in that one, and so on. I think also it's going to be a matter of time until an athlete starts monetizing their future earnings and stuff like that, which is going to get us into third-party rights, and which are illegal in some sports, or maybe not illegal, but they're not allowed in some sports. But super conscious, we've only got a minute or two left, so just want to see if you've got any closing thoughts.
My final thought would be, it's so difficult to become an athlete, as Naomi will know. The amount of sacrifice, my brother's my first client, and the amount of times I had to drive him around the motorway, spend 2 hours watching him train. You have to be the best at 16, the best at 18. And a lot of the times, a lot of my athletes who've earned big Premier League money have actually ended up not doing so well. So if you can actually keep your fan base and keep adding value to them and monetizing them later on, I'm all for that and all about that.
My final take is that for athletes, I think you are the brand. Actually, blockchain strategy provide a solution for that. And you can create your own brand by creating your community. And yes, do embrace blockchain strategy, and you make it.
I think my closing thought would be that I think Reddit have definitely done something right with the rebranding of the word. I think NFT has scared a lot of people off. So I think if we just keep using words that are a little more welcoming, I think a lot more athletes and people who have known nothing about the space can come in and feel like, you know what, I'm going to give this a try, rather than being so scared of it.
Yeah. Amen to that. My closing thought is that the technologies, NFT, blockchain, cryptography, are completely irrelevant to the end result. We do pitches where we don't even say those words, because it's about as relevant as what programming language and what database we use. So yeah, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming. Please come and talk to us after. Thank you.
Cheers, guys.